What did we learn yesterday?
We learned a lot yesterday. What stood out to me was parsing though. That was pretty cool.
Yep, what's parsing for?
Changing a type from changing, like for example, if I change a number to a string, like you're changing the type of, I forgot what the term is, but like yeah, that's what parsing does.
Yep, basically converting data types, right? Taking what is normally a string and making it into an integer. That's what parsing does for us. And we can parse in different directions and from certain data types to other data types, and that's kind of built right into JavaScript. But we learned about type of, right? And type of shows us the type of the variable, which is sometimes even more helpful than the data itself inside of the variable. What else did we learn?
If it's different, I would say float.
Float, yep. Float is another number type that allows us to have decimal points, right, in our numbers, compared to parse int, which is an integer that does not have decimal points.
Not something that we learned directly in class, but you asked us to find how to make the numbers go to a second decimal or to do math round.
Yeah, math.round, and kind of surprising that there's no feature built into JavaScript that says round to 2 decimal places, right? So instead, what we have to do is a formula to say, take whatever number we're rounding, multiply it by 100, round it there, and then divide by 100, and that gets us to the 2 decimal points. Kind of surprising that you can't just say round this number, comma 2, and get those 2 decimal points, but yeah, that was the kind of the extra credit homework, right? Was to say how do we get that to round off? So if we have some weird tip amount, we don't get anything past the 2 decimal places for cents. What else from yesterday? Anything that we need to revisit? Any homework assignments that we have questions on from Free Code Camp?
We learned about the
Go ahead.
Sorry. We learned about the on-click event.
What does on-click do, or what's a JavaScript event in general?
It's pretty much like for a experience, like a user will click it and JavaScript will like receive that click and then it'll show the information.
Exactly. So the on-click is just a way when we can say, hey, when an event happens, an event is basically saying the user is going to interact with something, right? So an on-click event is the most common type of JavaScript event, but there are also other events, like a blur event is very common of, okay, when a user clicks outside of a text field, we want to be able to do something. So clicks and hovers and blurs and focuses are the most common kinds of events, but there are lots of JavaScript events that are available to us. Speaking of events, what else did we have to use in order to get those events working?
Inner HTML?
Inner HTML is in the same category of what I'm looking for. What?
Get element ID.
Get element by ID. Yes. What's that part of? What's that acronym that I used?
Getting HTML. How to find HTML
Or
and
the document object model.
The document object model, right? The DOM. So that document object model is what allows our JavaScript to talk to our HTML, right? And so document object model is one of those things that gets thrown around a lot, but if you kind of break down those 3 words, it becomes much easier to understand the entire concept, right? So the document is our HTML document that is saying, hey, this is what the browser is showing up, right? The object, well, what's an object? It's the same object that we have in JavaScript, right? So that's why when we do our get element by ID, it makes sense that we can see dot inner HTML or dot value. That dot notation is actually operating on the object that the DOM is providing us from the HTML document, right? So that's the D and the O. And then when we put the M on there, the model is just saying this is the relationship between the two of them, right? Here is how the HTML shows up in HTML. But if we pull that in as an object, this is what it looks like. So that document object model is what is providing us the get element by ID, but then also all of the properties that are coming from that document get element by ID. So the dot inner HTML, the dot value, different properties that we can apply to our HTML, like a style tag, we could also do all from that HTML.
As observation from the homework and the video that Exona put on the students only channel, actually that video does exactly the same questions that are on the free code camp. So if you get stuck or if you have an issue, you could go to that video and look exactly where the video starts on that, and it will explain it through you from the beginning to the end.
Good tip. And the other tip is if you get stuck on a problem, sometimes it's easier to get the answer and then work your way backwards from the answer to understand the problem that they're asking you, right? Sometimes it's a simple little like, oh, I forgot a curly brace at the end of it, and that's why it's not letting me progress. Or you're looking at it and you're like, I really think my code is right here. I just don't understand why it's not working. So when you are in free code camp, let me see if I can pull it up easily. So when you're in a random problem in free code camp, and you're like, I just don't get it. I don't understand why this isn't working. I don't know what they're trying to say. There's this get help here, right? And if you click on that get help and go up to the get a hint, they will actually give you a hint, and usually they will also give you the solution as well. That's probably not a good example. Let me go back to one of the harder ones where they start breaking that down. So under here, they have these solutions, right? And you can go to the solutions and they'll give it to you. And so while it's good to kind of work your way through those requirements and all those test cases and kind of figuring out what they're asking you to do, sometimes it's easier to go, oh, okay, I actually understood what the parse int was doing, but I just didn't realize they wanted it inside the function instead of like right at the return or something like that. So sometimes it's easier to take this solution, kind of go back to the problem and realize, oh, I just need to enter, it in the function or whatever the right answer ends up being. So that get help, don't be afraid to use that, right? Sometimes it's easier to work your way back into understanding than it is to go from what they're asking you to do forward. Anything else from either last night or any questions from free code camp assignments that you guys might need some help on? Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi. I was looking over the code and rewatching the class from last night. I realized I don't have the parse int, and I want to fix that and make sure I have that in the right place. Is that supposed to be the const tip, a parse int instead of a parse float?
We used, let me pull this up. We used the parse float here because we wanted to allow the user to enter a decimal. So if they said that their total was $100.50, if we use a parse int here instead of a parse float, it would just chop off that 50 cents and only read the 100 that they entered. So that's why we use the parse float. If we use that parse int, it would still achieve the same thing. It just would ignore the cents.
Oh, okay. All right. So I have a good. Thank you.
Yeah, you were on the right track. That's the right line to put it. That's just two separate functions that achieve similar outputs. Anything else? Okay. Before we dive into our calculator project, which I will show in 1 second, I just wanted to give a shout out to what Ariel posted in the Slack channel. We are doing a blog post on all of you guys where we're looking for like a little 1 paragraph thing from you, 100 words or less, who you are, your journey up until this point. The reason why we do this is it is very helpful so that when an employer says, you know, oh, I'm interested in learning more about, enter student name here. When they search for you, our Hack Upstate blog has a decent amount of followers in it. And so this just gets you a little bit of media attention, right? This sets you up well for in a couple months from now when you are applying to jobs, a little background on who you are, and just gets shared out to Hack Upstate's media network. So if you could read this post, get it over to Ariel if you haven't already. Do not overthink this. This does not need to be a Shakespearean masterpiece here. You know, it's not a big deal to post about that stuff. But you do not want Ariel hunting you down, and she will hunt you down if you do not get this over to her. So just read this post. If you have any questions, you can message Ariel or me, and then we'll get that blog post out hopefully in the next week or two, so we can share kind of your journeys and announce you guys as students and your little background there. Any questions on any of that? If you would prefer your picture not to be shown, you can also include that in the note to Ariel. Just be like, hey, I prefer not to use a headshot. That's totally fine as well. Okay, so let's shift into what are we building tonight? Let me pull that up really quickly. So this is, I believe, going to take us 2 days to complete. We'll see how much we get done, but we're going to build this little calculator, right? And this calculator works where you can click on a number and it will add it to the screen. You can click on another number and it will add it to the screen. And it is a traditional calculator, right? Doing what you expect. You enter what you want, you hit enter, and you get the number. This is not super pretty, but again, we are focusing in on our JavaScript here, right? So we can clear, and if we even get really fancy, we're going to set it up so we can type in a number on our keyboard and go from there. So obviously we have a little work to do here. Even my own version doesn't allow us to hit the shift key to get that plus working, but we are going to work on building out our calculator tonight. With all of that said, let's go ahead and dive into our VS Code. So I'm going to pop open my VS Code. I'm going to go File, Open Folder. I'm going to create a new folder in my week 8. I'm going to call it day 2. I'm going to hit Open here. And I'm going to get my files created. So I'm going to create 3 files. One is going to be my index.html. One is going to be my script.js. And my final one is going to be my style.css. In my index.html, I'm going to do my exclamation point enter. I'm going to update my title to say calculator. I am going to create an H1 in here that says calculator. And bringing it back, we are going to link our style sheet in, right? So we have that external style sheet. So we're going to say link, and it needs to know what kind of link it is. It is a rel equals style sheet. And then it needs the href, and the href is going to go to our style.css. I am going to head over to my style.css to make sure the link is working. I'm going to target my H1. I'm going to make it a color fuchsia. Feeling pretty in pink tonight. And I'm going to go live and make sure that my calculator is showing up in a pretty pink. I'm also going to start a live share and then give you guys a minute to catch up on everything. We should have our pink calculator. If we do, we have confirmed our two style sheets are, I'm sorry, our HTML is linked to our style sheet, and we are cooking with gas. And let me start a poll here.
We're only linking to the style CSS, not the JS.
So far, yes. Ten votes in on the poll. Give you guys one more minute, and then we will keep going here. Again, we should have our index.html created along with our script.css and our style.css. Our style.css just has an H1 in it with a color of fuchsia. And then we went live in our browser and we made sure that our calculator H1 that we added to the index.html was showing up in pink. And if it is, you are good to go and all caught up. So before we
You
dive,
said script.css?
what's that?
You said script.css?
Yes, we didn't do anything with it yet. We just created it.
Okay, gotcha.
And these are pretty standard files. The name of these files, index.html matters, script.js, some people call it javascript.js, some people call it dynamic.js. Script.js is kind of the standard. Obviously, the file extension matters a lot more than the name itself. And then style.css, some people do styles.css. I don't really have a preference there. Some people name it after the page that they're styling, so they'll call it calculator.css instead of style.css. But it doesn't really matter there as long as you are consistent in how you are linking on the browser or in your HTML. Okay, so before we can create our JavaScript, we need to build out our user interface, right? And hopefully this is starting to feel a little bit more familiar because this is the step that we did last night as well, right? We said, all right, well, in order for a tip calculator to work, they need something that they can enter the information into. So we need to build our calculator interface so that the user can actually click on things that will make our JavaScript interactive. So we are going to build out a basic interface here. So we're going to start with a container because everything is nice to have in a container. So if we need to style it down the road, we can. And the first thing that I think of in a calculator is that screen at the top, right? When we have a basic calculator, there needs to be something to show up when we enter those numbers. So I'm entering IDs on here because I know I'm going to need them in my JavaScript. I know that I'm going to need to be able to target all of these different things, and that's why I'm going to add IDs to everything here. And I'm going to start out with 0 in my screen because most calculators, when you turn them on, they start at 0. From there, I'm starting to think about what my calculator looks like, right? We've got rows of buttons that show up. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to make a div, and that div is going to go across the screen, kind of like a row would do if we were using Bootstrap. And we need to think about what our buttons are in there. And so we are going to start with a button. And inside that button, it's going to be the number 1. And then, of course, we have button 2 and 3. And I'm going to save that and come over here and see, hey, my calculator is starting to take shape. Okay. Now, on the next row, I'm going to do another div. And I'm going to say button. And I'm going to do my 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going to copy that entire div and do one more 7, 8, 9. And we cannot forget about our 0. So I save that and I go, all right, it's not pretty, but we're getting all of that functionality out there, right? We're thinking about what are all of the things a user should be able to do in a calculator. Well, they need to be able to click on any of those buttons and enter that information. But normally a calculator has additional operations, right? And they stick those operations kind of down the side here. So we're also going to do that. We're going to add another button that says plus. We're going to add a button in the second row that says minus. We do a button in the third row that says multiply. And then down here, we've got to figure out what's left. Well, we've got divide left, but we also have 2 other things. We also need the ability to total everything. We need that equal button to say, all right, actually do this math. And then finally, we also need the ability to clear. So I'm going to stop there. We've got a very ugly interface here. We don't have any styling done yet, but we've got all of the basic user interaction done, right? So pausing here, giving you guys a moment to catch up. I'm going to relaunch the poll so I know where you're at. Hopefully none of this is a surprise to you guys. We are not using Bootstrap here because we're past that HTML module, right? With that said, if you wanted to use Bootstrap in this, you most certainly could. And we do have a lot of students who, once they complete any of these JavaScript assignments, they kind of go back in and add in a little bit more styling, add their own color, and go from there. So while mine is not going to be super pretty, do not let me stop you from making yours pretty after class.
Max,
Yes,
did you start a live share?
I did, and I put it in Slack.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, looks like most of us are caught up. Do we have any questions here before we continue? All right, so I am going to switch over to my styling. And I normally don't spend a ton of time on my styling here, but I do want to get this looking like a calculator, feeling like a grid and a button. So the first thing I notice is my buttons are all not lining up. And the reasoning behind that is this plus symbol is actually a little bit more wide than this multiply or even this minus here. So because of that, just because they all have one symbol in them does not mean that they are equal widths. So normally you guys have heard me say like never hard code height, never hard code width. But in this situation, we actually can get away with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to target our button. And we're going to say, hey, every button is going to be 30 pixels wide. That starts cleaning up our width, right? Now they're all consistent. But I hate that there's no space between them. So I'm going to add a little margin on the left of them, just a little, say 3px, and a little margin on the right of them, another 3px. Now we get a little bit of spacing there, but it looks pretty bad, right, to have them all on top of each other. So let's put a little margin down at the bottom of 10px, and now we're feeling like there's a little bit more breathing room in there. That's looking good. But I don't really love that gray background on it, right? It feels very templated HTML. It feels very stock. So this is just total styling decision. I'm going to add a background of none on them. And then I want those buttons to be a little bit bigger. I don't want the button to feel like the number is crowding the space. So inside the border, I'm going to use a little padding. And you know what? I'm feeling good about that. Feeling like that's rocking it. But I don't love my screen. Right? My screen doesn't really feel like it's fitting in with everything else. So I go back to my index.html and I go, oh, look, I already thought through that. I put an ID of screen on there. So I'm going to go back to my style CSS. I'm going to target my screen and I'm going to make my screen stand out a little bit. I'm going to make the background color on it green. And I'm like, ooh, don't love that. We're going to need to fix that in a second. But while I'm here, let's make the text color white for that screen. Let's make the font family Courier New. So it feels like that old school kind of binary numbers. And then let's fix that screen. I need some space to push everything down. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to put some margin on the bottom of 15px. So my button has a little bit of breathing room. I'm going to add padding of 10px so that green area doesn't feel like the numbers are right at the edge of the screen. And when we think about a calculator, when we enter numbers in a calculator, they don't show up on the left side, right? When we type them in, they show them up on the right side. So that's a simple text align right. And this is, by the way, the order that I would write this if I were making this from scratch. I mean, I totally am making this from scratch. I've never made this calculator before. But if I were making this from scratch, this is the same order I would do it, right? Thinking about the styling and starting to look at these buttons and going, what don't I like about this button? Okay, the edge is too close to the number, right? So I'm going to throw some padding on there. Or what's the biggest thing when you think of a screen? You kind of think of that green background, right? And then you go, oh, well, the black text doesn't work on a green background, so I got to fix that. So CSS is just picking away at it until you get that styling to be where you want it to be. So the last thing we have here is this screen is obviously too big for these numbers. But we can kind of cheat here a little bit because we know exactly how big each one of these numbers are. So because of that, we can actually target our container and set a width on it of 160 px. We can also add a little bit of styling on it. Let's do a border of 3px solid green. That kind of makes the whole calculator feel like this is all one cohesive unit. And then we can even add, we can get a little fancy and add a box shadow 3px, 3px light green. That gives it a little bit of a depth effect going on there. If you hate it, you don't need to use it, but we're just adding a little styling there, making it feel more cohesive. Gonna stop there, repoll, make sure you guys are following along. That was a lot of CSS, so no big deal if you need a minute to catch up on it. CSS is one of those things that once I write it, you're like, yeah, of course, I get it. That makes sense. But take a step back and make sure you understand kind of the order that we did things, right? Make sure you understand why are we targeting that CSS? What makes this design feel like it's coming together? And I think it's really a cool thing. If you comment out your CSS, you can say that's where we started, right? That was, hey, let's just get everything of our HTML together. And with only under 25 lines of CSS, we were able to pull this interface together. I think that's pretty cool. All right, we got mostly everyone voted in here. Last chance for any questions here before we continue.
Yeah, sorry. Mine does not look like that. I
It
don't know.
looks even prettier, right?
No, mine looks terrible. There's no color. I don't understand what I did wrong.
Go ahead, share your screen. Let's take a look.
Jeez. I wish. Like I'm not. So that's my.
Okay, everything looks okay there. So let's look wherever we get, number one, you're using HTML comments in your CSS.
How do I do CSS comments again?
Is it a double slash? Is it JavaScript style? I can never remember. I think
Double backslash or backslash star.
Say hold on.
oh, it's only backslash star. You can't use double backslash like you can in
Okay.
JavaScript.
Backslash.
The
Sorry.
main
Star.
forward slash still works.
Oh,
on
no.
shortcut.
Star backslash at the end.
Star backslash.
Yep.
Star backslash. Okay.
And then on line 10, if you just hit command slash, it will put the stars in for you.
Command slash.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And then just watch your container probably has a lowercase c in your HTML.
Yep.
And I think if you save, you should be back in business.
It looks like this.
I can only see your VS Code.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. And it looks like that.
Okay. So now we've got some styling applying to things we obviously don't want styling applied to. So to me, that says, hey, maybe we're missing a closing div in our HTML. So let's go back over to our HTML. And we've got our opening screen, but then we've got all of our buttons inside of the screen. We don't want our buttons inside the screen. We want to close out that screen div.
Oh, okay. So you want me to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then
make another
enter.
div?
Yep, you got it. And I think if you take out that one, it auto inserted for you. I think you should be all caught up.
Perfecto.
Beautiful.
Does that look how yours looks?
Yeah, the only thing I did in mine was for that screen div, instead of leaving it empty, I put a 0 in there because calculators normally start at 0.
Okay.
And then yours looks identical.
Perfect. Fixed it.
Artrell,
Thank you.
go ahead. You think
So I
I was
was
gonna
looking over
sneak a
my
little HTML review in here, did you? A little styling sneak in there. All right, go ahead, Artrell. Sorry.
So I was looking over my HTML and I realized underneath title calculate, I forgot to put in my link style sheet. So I'm putting it in now. If I still don't get it, then I'll raise my hand again.
You got it.
All right, thank you.
That is the whole reason we do that H1 color fuchsia, by the way. Obviously, we're not going to leave that in our styling, but there's no way to know if your link tag is properly linked unless we have something to style. So that's why we always do that step, because it's very easy to be like, oh my God, I wrote 100 lines of CSS and none of it is all working. And it can sometimes come down to that link tag, just, having an extra letter in it or whatever. Bobby, go ahead.
I was just wondering why in a screen tag, like on a style CSS page, why you put monospace.
Yeah, so good question. So this is called fallback fonts. And it's basically saying use Courier New if Courier New is installed on the computer. If it's not installed, use Courier, and if it still isn't installed, use monospace.
Okay.
And so there are 4 font types, 3 font types, 4 font types off the top of my head that are installed in every browser dating back to like the 1980s. Monospace, serif, sans serif, and cursive. So those are the 3 or the 4 types that like are the fallbacks. But if you do a Google search for web safe fonts, you'll get a list of 12 or so fonts that are installed on every computer, right? And so if for whatever reason BrushScript MT was not installed, it would default, you would use cursive and it would default its way back to that. So Google Fonts obviously opens the door to a lot more font types, but whenever we use a font family, you should specify as the last kind of comma value there, sans serif, serif, cursive, or monospace, because that's what's guaranteed to work in any web browser.
Okay.
Good question. Anything else? All right. That is it for our CSS. Believe it or not, we are done with our CSS. There is nothing more that we need to add to that unless we get into the more advanced stuff later tonight. So what we are going to do is we are going to dive in to making our buttons work. So before what we did, I'm going to pop open my script.js and I'm going to move that to the right side of my screen so you guys can see both of what we're working on. Before, how did we make our on-click event work?
If I remember.
What's that?
Element ID.
We use document.getElementById. That was the way that we got our JavaScript to reach into our HTML and say, find this element. And when you find this element, attach the on-click to it. But we can actually do that in reverse. Instead of telling our JavaScript to go find something in our HTML, we can tell our HTML to go find something in the JavaScript. So the way we do that is in our button over here, we are going to add an on-click event. And that on-click is going to say, go find the button clicked. And when you do that, pass in the event information. So I'm only working on my number 1 here, right? I want to make sure that this is going to work before I forget anything in and replicate it across all my buttons. So again, I'm going to add this button, the button that already exists. I'm adding an on-click. I'm telling it what function I want it to run, and I'm telling it, hey, include the event information when it does run. So I'm going to come back over to my JavaScript now, and I'm going to say const button clicked. It's going to receive that event information as a parameter. And when it runs, all I want to do is console log out button clicked. So I can't see my console log unless I come over here and I pop open my inspect and look in the console. And I've got my console open. I refresh the page, make sure we're all up to date. I go to my one, I click on one, and I get button clicked is not defined. What you talking about, Willis? Button clicked is defined right here. What step did we miss?
The sheets are not linked together.
Bingo. We linked to our style sheet, but we did not put a script tag in our index.html to tell it that our script.js exists. So we're going to go down to right before our closing body tag, and we are going to put in a script tag with an src to our script.js. So I save there. I go back over to my browser. I click on one here, and I get button clicked coming out down at the bottom. Stopping there for questions, making sure you guys are following along.
Can you show me again where you put the button clicked? What
Yes.
else you did? Sorry.
So we did two things on our HTML side. We added this button clicked inside the button tag itself.
Yep.
Then down at the bottom, we added our script source script.js.
Okay.
And then finally, we defined, hey, what happens when the button is clicked? We get this event and we console log out button clicked.
Okay.
And if everything is working, you should be able to right click inspect in your browser, go to the console tab right here, have your button, make sure you can see your console, click on one. None of the other buttons will work, but one should work. And if it does, oh, excuse me, you should see button clicked in your console.
Oh, I really don't.
Raise your hand. I'll come to you next, Jennifer. Brandon, go ahead.
This is a quick question, but why is it that the script, like to link to the JavaScript, why does the script have to go at the bottom when the CSS was like, yeah.
So that's a very loaded question. The answer is it doesn't, right? Basically what we say is we put the link all the way up at the head tag because we don't really want the user to see all of our HTML content without all the styling applied to it. So that's why we put the link tag kind of up at the top. The very technical answer for why we put our JavaScript at the bottom is that JavaScript can be what we call render blocking. So in other words, if we put our JavaScript up at the top, we can actually say, hey, don't show this HTML or even this style sheet until you're done processing all of our JavaScript. Now, for our little lightweight calculator, it's not a big deal that the JavaScript would run before the HTML shows up. But in general, we normally want some of our HTML to show up, for example, a loading message, and then our JavaScript to run to go get the content or show any of that up, and then actually make that content interactive. So that's why we put that script tag down at the bottom. There are use cases for putting it higher up, but kind of best practice most of the time is to put it towards the bottom, still in that body tag, but keeping it down there so it doesn't impact any other content from showing up.
Thank you.
Archel, go ahead.
Was Jennifer first?
Nope, I think she figured it out.
Okay. So when I click the button one, is it supposed to do anything right now based on what we've done?
If you have the console open, you should be able to see button clicked down here.
I do not. That's why.
You
Okay.
do not have the console open, or you do not see button clicked?
I don't have the console open on the bottom.
There you go. Yep.
Okay.
So remember, console is just for us as developers to debug, right? We would never expect an end user to open up the console to interact with our website. But as a developer, that's how we can kind of see what the computer is doing without exposing it to the end user. Kalai, go ahead.
So is the button clicked is considered as one event, right? So anytime we do, okay, thank you.
Correct. Yep, and it's the same concept of the on click that we did last night. The only difference last night is we said in our JavaScript, go find this HTML element and attach the on click event to the element using the get element by ID, which is the document object model, right? The DOM. We kind of turned the tables tonight. We said instead of our JavaScript finding it in our HTML, we told our HTML to go find it in our JavaScript. Bobby, go ahead.
Mine is still saying on the console, on reference error button clicked is not defined.
Do you have your script tag at the bottom of your HTML?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, share your screen. Let's take a look. Okay, you got your script.js, that's linked in there. You've got your button clicked. Everything looks right there. Let's go to your script.js. And you are missing the parentheses around event.
There we go.
And you should not have that semicolon there.
Here or here?
There.
I don't
And
know.
you also should not have a colon between your console log and your parentheses. Now, if you save and go test in the browser,
Cool.
you're good to go.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alba, go ahead.
Mine is doing the same thing, but I do have the brackets and I do have the.
Share your screen. Let's take a look.
I have my script and I have the on click.
Capital C versus lowercase c.
On the button clicked.
Yep, you got uppercase C here and lowercase c there.
All right, thank you.
No problem. That's what I was actually going to bet Bobby's issue was, so I'm glad it was one of yours. Any other questions? All right, we feeling like we got a good foundation here. We got our user interface going. We've got our button clicked handling. Now we got to figure out, all right, how do we, what do we want to do when that button is clicked? But before we do that, we want to handle when any of these buttons are clicked, right? Not just one of them. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy our on click from our one, and we're literally going to put it on every single one of our buttons here. So that way, when we click on any one of those buttons, our function will fire. But while we're doing that, the first thing we need to know in our button clicked is what button was clicked, right? We're going to do something differently if one is clicked than if two is clicked or multiply is clicked. So we need to handle that. So what we're going to do is we are going to console.log our event, and our event has some information on it. So if I switch back over to the browser, you see this object shows up in our browser console. And if you open it, there's all kinds of information in here. Whether the Alt key was pressed when it was clicked on, what the positioning of the mouse was when it got clicked, whether the Control key was getting hit, all kinds of information in here, but one of them is the target. Okay, the target is where the event happened. What target did the event happen on? So if I open that, I get all kinds of more information in here. But if we go all the way down, we already have a friend that we've used before, inner HTML. Okay, that is showing me what button got clicked on. And in fact, if I clear out my console by hitting this little clear icon and click on something like equal, you see I get that same object. And if we go back through and find our target is going to have all this information. But if we go down to our friend inner HTML, we can see the equal there. Okay, well, because it's an object, we already know how to deal with this. We can say button text is equal to our event, and it's an object, so I can use my dot notation and say go into the target. And when you're in the target, go another layer deep, go get our inner HTML. And we might need to reference that button text multiple times. So it would be a pain to say event.target.innerHTML every time we wanted to reference that button text. So instead, what we do is we store it in a new variable called button text. So now whenever we want to reference it, like in a console log, which we should do to make sure it's working, we can save that out, come back over to the browser, and now when we click on any button, we should be able to see what button we clicked on down in the console. So again, I added my button clicked on click event to all of my buttons in my HTML. Once I completed that, I went over to my JavaScript. I created that const button clicked function that we had from before, and I'm using this event. This event is getting generated by that on click event. That event has all kinds of information in it, like we saw in the browser, one of which is the target information. Hey, what was the target of that event? And inside that target, that's just an HTML element, right? That's like the same thing as saying document get element by ID. So because of that, we can dive in and get that inner HTML to know what button was clicked. Okay. So,
Okay.
oh yeah, go ahead.
So the console.log button text is just saying whatever button we press, make sure that that's the number that comes up, or that's the sign that comes up. Okay.
Correct. Well, we haven't even make it come up. All we're saying is output it to the console so we can make sure that we have access to whatever is in there.
Okay.
Okay, so taking it to the next step, what's the next thing we need to do in our JavaScript? When we click on one of these buttons, what do we expect to happen?
The number gets added to the screen.
Exactly. So we're going to come in here and we're going to say, well, how do we get access to our screen? Well, clever us, we already added an ID to it. So we can get access to that screen by saying, hey, let's say const screen equals document dot get element by ID. And what ID do we want to get? We want to get the screen. Okay, now that we have the screen, we can update the inner HTML inside the screen to be equal to whatever our button text is. We're going to go rapid fire on a couple issues here. So I come over here and I click on 3 and 3 shows up in my screen. And I'm like, yay, it's working. We don't need to test anymore. And then I hit 2 and 2 shows up and I'm like, oh, well, 32 should be showing up, right? Not just the 2. So what we can say here is we can say, hey, take whatever the inner HTML currently is and add on what the button text is. So now I come over here, I've got 0 and I click 3 and now I get 0, 3. I'm like, all right, well, that's not how a calculator would work. But if I click on the 2, now my 2 shows up. And if I click on the plus shows up. So I'm like, great, we're making the right progress. But I need to say something here to say if the screen currently has a 0 in it, then clear it out and just set whatever button clicked is in there. However, if it is any other number or any other text in there, then we can just add on to it. So we're going to do that exact thing. We're going to say if the screen inner HTML is equal to 0. Now, why are we putting 0 in quotes here? Remember, this inner HTML plays dirty. Anytime we use inner HTML, it is always going to be a string. It is not going to be a number. So that's why we put that 0 in quotes there. So we say if the screen inner HTML is equal to 0, make the new inner HTML equal to whatever the button text is. Otherwise, else make it equal to whatever the current screen inner HTML is plus the button text in here. Archel, I see I'm coming over. So when we are in our browser, now we've got 0. And if we click on 3, we only get 3. But if we click on any other number, we get the 3 and the 5. Archel, go ahead.
All right, so to make sure I'm understanding this, the
Yep.
concept. So when it's screen.inner HTML, is that always going to be the first number that's present on the screen?
The first time this code runs, yes. So this equal to 0 is the case because we put the 0 in right here.
Okay.
And we could even test that by saying console.log our screen.inner HTML. And so we could come over here and say let's make our text on instead. Well, when we come over here, we see on, of course, that's what we expect in our HTML. But as soon as we click on a number, what console logs out? The word on. That is because we said, go get the screen using the DOM get element by ID, and then give us access to whatever is in that inner HTML. So we're going to put that back to 0. But that is what gets us our inner HTML. So if you want to keep talking through your logic, you're welcome to.
All right, that made sense because when you said the if, that's where I was on. I'm like, yeah, if it's not the first number. So the screen 0, that's what the screen's going to show first. So if it's that, we add another number to it, it goes away. But for something else, then we add upon it.
Correct.
I'm not verbalizing it right, but you know what I'm saying.
What we're saying basically here is if it is 0, overwrite whatever is in there and set it equal to whatever button text that got clicked on. Right. Otherwise, we're going to take it, overwrite whatever is in there with whatever is currently in there, plus the whatever button we clicked on.
Right. And because the ID screen is 0, whenever we add a 0 after the fact, we're not going to get rid of it.
Correct. So if we go 3, 0, that works as expected.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So we figure out what we want to do next based off of, well, what do we expect as a user? So I come over here and I'm like, okay, 3 plus 2. And I come down here and I hit equal. And I'm like, well, that's not what I wanted. It's almost like we got to tell this computer what to do. Okay, so we come back over to our button clicked, and we've got to handle that, right? Well, we've got our button clicked event, but equal is significant enough that it probably deserves its own function, right? So we're going to come down here and say const equal clicked. It's going to equal something with a new event coming in. And now I could do an if statement in here, right? Just like we did here. We could say if the button text clicked was equal, then don't do anything else. Run this separate function instead. But I think the clearer way of handling that is instead in our HTML, we're going to go find our equal button. And instead of using button clicked, we're going to use equal clicked instead. So 2 different ways of coding this. We definitely could add an if statement in our button clicked that said if the button clicked is equal, then go do this other function instead. But instead, we're going to leverage each button having its own on-click event and use that instead. Bobby, go ahead.
For some reason, my calculator is still like showing a 0.
Okay. Share your screen. Let's take a look.
That's the new web.
Let's look at your code. So you've got a random 0 in quotes on line 4. You can take that out.
I honestly don't even know why that. I don't remember typing that in. But.
And then line 5, you've got screen.html. What should that be?
Inner HTML.
Yeah. It should be screen.innerHTML. Yep. Go ahead and give that a try.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm also having the same issue.
Go ahead, share your screen. Yours is a different problem. You said if it's equal to 0 right here, but
Yeah.
look at what it starts out as.
Oh, space.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see it. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
I should really do like student issue bingo and just see if I can, like, based off of what you guys all right. So we are going to get our equal clicked working. But before I get too far here, I want to make sure that my functions are lining up, right? So I'm just going to do a console.log equal just to make sure that things are lining up and not erroring out. So I come back over here, I type 3 plus 3, I hit equal, and I get equal coming out down here. And I also don't get my equal showing up in the screen. So all we're really confirming here is that my equal clicked is lined up with my equal clicked over here, and it's no longer firing my button clicked up here because we changed that on click event over to our equal clicked. So we actually get off pretty easy here. In order to figure out what is equal, we need to pool whatever information is on the screen. So in order to do that, we are going to say const input equals document. Whoa, no, we're not. Document dot get element by ID. And we're going to grab our screen again. And from that, we want to get out the inner HTML. What information has been inputted into that screen? Now we can console log our input and make sure we're getting what we expect. We come over here, we say 3 plus 3, we hit equal, and we get 3 plus 3 coming out of our console. All of that's looking good. Does anyone know how we can actually make 3 plus 3 get added together in our JavaScript?
Do we have to write a string?
We have the string already because that's the input. So how do we get that string to actually give us 6?
Math.
Can we parse it or
Is it a
turn
function?
it?
We need to use a function. It is not parse.
Right.
So what we're going to do here is instead of me just giving you the answer, we're going to lean into Google. We're going to say, make JavaScript run string. And oh, convenient. Stack Overflow, go down a little bit. Not only do they tell us about this eval function, but what we're able to do is click on eval and get all the information about how eval works under the hood. What eval is doing is it's taking in this string and pretending as if we typed in 2 plus 2 directly in our JavaScript. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to say const output equals evaluate the input. And then we are going to console log out the output. Okay, and go back over. I take a look at my calculator. I say 9 times 9 equals, and I get 81. Okay, we're on the right track. Where do we want that 81 to show up? Dang-nabbit, we want to get our screen again and make it equal to our output. Careful there. We want to make the inner HTML of our screen equal to the output. So we come over here, we say 9 times 9, hit equal, and we get 81.
Can you go back to your code? Sorry.
So we're going to take a step back here, right? Okay, what's happening here? Whenever a button is clicked, we are updating, we are going to our HTML, and we are saying, hey, the button clicked is here. Get the details of the event, get the inner HTML from the target of the event, and store it into our button text. What does that mean when we click on the button 9? 9 becomes our button text. Then we go back to our HTML, we get the element by the ID, which is our screen over here, and we save that into our screen. Then we say if the screen's inner HTML is currently equal to 0, then override whatever is in the screen HTML with whatever button we clicked on from here. However, if it is not equal to 0, take whatever is currently in the screen, add in whatever we clicked on in our button, and set that now into the screen's inner HTML. Okay, great. That makes our pluses show up, all of our numbers show up, all of our operations, but our equal clicked needs to do something pretty different. So we changed the onClick function and made it line up with this onClick function here. Okay, now we say get the screen again, get the inner HTML from it, and all of that is what we need to run as our input. 9 plus 9, or whatever got inputted there. Then we take that input and dump it into our evaluate. Our eval is going to take whatever string is in that screen's inner HTML and output it after it evaluates it into our new output variable. Then based off of that output, we are then going to put our output back into the screen's inner HTML.
Okay. This is my aha moment.
We like inspiring those. Jennifer.
I have something not working and I don't know why. I
Go ahead,
can't
share your screen. Let's take a look.
click the buttons. Like hammer didn't work.
Oh, you can't share your screen. Sorry. Now you can share your screen.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing I don't love is I can't see any output in your console, which may be telling us that there is an error in there that can help us figure out why it's not working. So if you grab that middle bar kind of right in here, you can drag that up so we can see more of what's in the console. Yep, you got it. Okay, so now we're getting an error that button clicked is not defined on line 16, 17, 15, all of that. So to me, that's telling us, hey, our HTML can't find our button clicked, and that is why it's undefined. So let's go look at our HTML or our JavaScript and see what's going on there. Okay, so first thing I notice, we've got a document.evaluate. The function that we're looking for is just eval. So I would take that document.evaluate out and just make that eval in there. And then go ahead and save that. And now we're going to go back to your browser. And we've got uncaught syntax error. And it says script, which is helpful. But then it has that 11 in there. That's telling us line 11 has the issue. So let's go look at what line 11 is and scroll over a little bit. Aha. Where do we see that squiggly?
Right here.
Yep. So the problem isn't actually with that squiggly, it's the character before where the squiggly was, which is the semicolon.
Oh.
So take that semicolon out and put your period back in.
Either. Oh.
And save that. And now let's go back to your browser and refresh. And now you've got a different error, but now it's at 13.
Okay, let's see if I can do this. 13.
Okay, so here's the problem here. It got to the end of the file and it's like, that's it, I'm done. Something's not lining up. What happened here is you have your opening closing for your if and your closing for your if, and you have your opening for your else. But what is this closing? That's closing your function. So what you're missing right here is your closing curly brace for the else.
Should that go here?
Click in there and hit enter. And then do your closing curly and it should put it in the right spot for you. Oh, you did opening. We need closing there. There you go.
Okay, so got it. So that's belonging to the right tab. Okay. Let's find out. Now there's no error.
We like that.
But I can't click a button.
Okay, so let's go back to your code. Let me just remote control here so I can take a look. Screen 0. Get element by ID, screen, button text. Okay, here you said take whatever the current screen inner HTML is and add the button text. And do what with it? What we want to do is we want to say, take the screen inner HTML and make it equal to whatever button we clicked on if the 0 is the only thing showing up in there.
I don't see what's missing.
What you had here was a plus. We don't want a plus, we want an equal.
Okay.
What we're doing is we're saying if the 0 is what's showing up in the screen, take whatever button got clicked on and overwrite that into whatever screen HTML we want to show up.
Right. Okay. Whatever number we want to calculate.
So now we do 3 plus 3 and we hit equal and we're on the right track. Now our screen is showing up, but you did all of the work here to generate the output, but then you didn't use that output anywhere. So the last thing you need is your
document.
Yeah. Get element by ID, get the screen, go get the HTML inside the screen and make it equal to our output.
Yeah, I got lost.
And you're good to go.
Ooh, geez, thank you.
Bobby, go ahead.
For some reason on my calculator, it keeps coming up just like the numbers are doubling for some reason when I click them, and then like it's not equals and stuff. Is like none of that stuff's working.
Okay, share your screen. Okay, so refresh the screen to clear everything out. Okay, and try 9 times 9 equals. Okay, so let's fix the double button click issue first. Let's go look at your code. And you've got your if statement. You've got your else statement. And then you tell it, regardless of the if or the else, also do this thing down here where we set the inner HTML.
No. Here's that.
I don't know why. It must be something going on with my keyboard or something, because like random lines keep just popping up for some odd reason.
What we did is we took that line you just deleted and moved it into the else. And I think what happened is you copied and pasted it instead of cut and pasting it.
But I didn't even do that at all. I just typed the line above it. I went above and hit enter and just typed the line above it. So I don't know.
Well, we already had that line. So what likely happened is that you saw that line appear and you said, oh, I need to type that out. The other thing that you're missing here is that your inner HTML needs to be equal to your inner HTML plus your button text. Right now, you're just adding it all together.
Okay. So,
yep, that becomes an equal. And we're going to say save on that. And now let's go back to your browser and see what's happening. Okay, so now we've got a problem. Your equal button isn't doing what we expect it to do. So what code should we be looking in to see where our, yep. So that's what happens in the JavaScript, but where do we tell our HTML to use that JavaScript?
it's gotta be down here somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm. So find your equal button, and what are we telling it to run when we click on the equal?
Equal. Right here.
What are we telling it to run?
The button clicked.
What should we be telling it to run?
Okay. So would this on click change from button clicked to what exactly?
Well, what are our two functions?
Get document, get
What are
Right.
the two functions that we have made?
two functions that we have made. Are you saying in JavaScript?
Mm-hmm.
So the button clicked and the equal clicked.
Okay, and so what do we need to change in our HTML to make it run the function that we want?
But I'm not sure.
Sorry, Greg.
No, you're
Okay,
good.
what are, I'm not giving you the answer here. You got to work through this. What function runs when any of those buttons gets clicked? What's the name of the function that gets run?
The button click, right?
Yes. And we just said that we have two different functions. One is button clicked and one is equal clicked. What do we need to change in your HTML to get that to work? There you go.
My fault.
So go ahead and save that. Pushing you here only because this is good verbiage, right? You're learning the words to use to say, all right, this is a function, this is the on-click event, and now you're all caught up.
Definitely. Thank you.
Sorry, don't mean to be hard on you. I say it so that other people can also hear it as well of, okay, what did we just make? We made two functions here. What does that on click do? Oh, it's looking for a function in our own code to run.
Yes, I appreciate it though. Thank you.
Shander, you're up next.
My stuff isn't whatchamacallit, on the can I share my screen?
Mhm.
Okay. Lower hand. Give me a second. Can you see my screen?
I can.
I'm not seeing my console, anything. Like I press stuff and nothing pops up in my console.
Okay, so show me your console log in your code.
Mm. My console. Oh, I don't think I have the console log on my.
So you can't expect anything to show up in your console if you didn't tell it to console log.
Right.
So all of your code is actually right. It's doing everything you want it to. The reason I took my console log out is once I knew the console log was outputting what I expected, I went back through my code and I took it out. So oftentimes when we're writing our code, we write a lot of lines that we end up going back and deleting once we figure out that it is working.
I was wondering why you kept removing console log after you put it in. That caught me off guard.
Yeah, we keep removing it because we don't really want to show, it's considered a little messy to leave console logs into your code because a regular end user could open up the console and be like, whoa, what's happening here, right? And so that's why we go back and remove that code out.
Okay.
Xona, go ahead.
So when I go to press my calculator, if I press on any number, it gives me double of that number.
Okay, I think you have the same issue Bobby had right under your if else statement. Do you have another line of code?
It's the screen dot inner
Yeah, we
HTML.
don't want that there. We want to say if the screen inner HTML is 0, set the button text. Otherwise, set it equal to whatever it currently is and the button text, and then that's it. We don't want anything else to run after that for that button clicked.
Okay, so you want me to just remove the screen dot inner HTML?
Yeah, the third one. Because you have one in the if statement, one in the else statement, and then you shouldn't have a third one.
Oh, I don't have an else statement. That's probably why.
Ah, okay. Well, then put that line of code back in and put that line of code surrounded by an else statement, and you're good to go.
Okay, so. Okay. Else. Okay, I don't know if I'm. Now it left the 0.
Okay, share your screen. Let's take a look. Okay,
just-
so you still need your, watch your indentation here. You're probably getting lost in that. So let me request. And you still need your, okay, so if it's 0, then we just set it in. Otherwise, we set in whatever it currently is and add the button text onto the end of it.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's make, undo. And save that. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions? Okay, we are going to go on break, be back at 7:25.
So are we gonna make a function for the clearing, to clear it out, or because I was looking through and the C is under button clicked, and I was like, well, we already made a const for that. So I was like, how are we gonna do that? Are we gonna rename it?
Class isn't over yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we do have some more work to do. We got 3 major functions that we need to tackle still. Error handling, the clear clicked, and then, hey, how do we make this work if we type down, if we press like numbers, how do we get that working? And yes, it is certainly snowing here. I almost cannot see the ground anymore.
That was this,
Too early for snow.
I looked out the window and I was like, huh? Oh.
I think it's pretty late for snow for us. I'm used to Halloween.
Yeah.
That was me. Henry's outside knocking on the window trying to get the students, I think, putting the chickens away. And I'm like, what the heck? Where'd all that snow come from?
Yeah. Great hat, Karen.
All right. So let's dive back into where we left off here. So if I share my screen, I'm in here. I refresh the page to clear everything out manually. I type 3 plus enter. Ooh. Well, of course 3 plus enter isn't going to work, but what happened down here? We got an unexpected end of input. Okay, well, it was expecting 3 plus something entered in there, and that didn't work. What JavaScript concept can we use here to try and solve for that problem? How do we do error handling, Artrell?
I was up to ask you, like, what stupid question? What do we want it to say? Because 3 plus something, we need an additional number for it to do anything.
So we want to say, hey, there's an error here, right? Maybe we should just display that there is an error and let the user retry it. Because right now they're hitting 3 plus and they're hitting enter. And if they don't have the console open, they have no idea that there's an error. So
Gotcha.
what we want to do is we want to display to the user, hey, there's an error. You should try and clear and try again, right?
Right.
Else,
What's
If-
that?
we do a type of an if else statement.
Kind of, but an if else is like when we know what the output is, right? We almost need to try to do some code and catch any error that might get thrown. So that's what we're going to do in our code here. We're going to say try to get the HTML eval the input and set it to the output. But if there is an error, catch the error and console.log, we are the captain now. So I come over here and I say 3 plus enter, and I get we are the captain now. Okay, what that's doing is that's giving us control here of saying whatever comes in this curly brace here and here is going to run if whatever got tried up here doesn't work. But if we refresh and we say 9 times 3 and hit enter, it still works without any output in the console. So what we're able to do is we're able to say, try to run this code. Catch any error that gets thrown, and instead document get element by ID screen and set the inner HTML there equal to error. So I come over here, I say 9 times enter, and I get error showing up instead. So this is a try catch. It's very common to see in code of anytime that we have any user input, but we still want control over what our code is doing. We can tell our code to try something, and if an error happens, catch it and do something else instead. Pretty basic concept, but good to do error handling. Okay, so we've got all of that working. I would now like to go a step past my error. So I type in 3 and I get error 3. I'm like, dag nabbit. Wait, didn't we already solve this problem? We did. We said if the screen inner HTML is 0, why don't we also handle if the screen, whoa. Why don't we handle if the screen is equal to 0 or the screen inner HTML is equal to the word error, then clear out whatever was in the screen and only take the button that got entered. This double bar, that is the key right underneath your delete button to the right of the curly braces. It is a key that you may have never used on your keyboard before. That is going to be your shift and your delete key. That is your logic operator for OR. So we know and is 2 ampersands, but what we're saying is if the screen HTML is equal to 0 or it's equal to the word error, then we want to override whatever is in there. So now if we do 9 times equal, we get our error, but if I type in another number, it's going to clear out. Pausing there. Archel, go ahead.
What are the sequence of buttons? Shift plus what?
The button underneath your delete button. So right next to the curly braces. Yeah.
Above the backslash. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got all of that working. We're making good progress here. But if I do 9 times equal, I get error, I should be able to clear all of that back out, right? I should be able to click on this button, and instead of it typing a C, I should have it automatically clear out for me. This is where I yeet you out of the nest. You are going to get your clear buttons working on your own. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to start a poll, and you want to get your clear button working. So I'll give you guys a hint. We want to get our clear button working similar to how we got our equal button working, right? Making a new function and having it update the screen back to that 0 that we started at. So I'm going to let you guys do that. If you get stuck and need to cheat, I'm going to also do it right now. But take a couple minutes, try and get your clear button working. Seven votes in. Remember, what we're working on here is making a new function for our clear clicked. We are updating our on click in our HTML to use that new function. And then in our function, we are getting our screen again and setting that inner HTML back to the 0 that we started out with.
Quick question, can you have 2 ors?
Yes, you can have 3 ors or 2 ands, an and an or or. Yes, you can. All right, looks like most of you guys are in here. Does anyone want to talk through their solution of how they got it working?
I looked up if there was a clear click function, so I just clear clicked on the C.
Yep.
Here, and then created a function just like the equal clicked to trigger the clear clicked.
Okay, and then talk through what's going on in the clear clicked.
So I did a const clear clicked that equals to the event, and it will go through the document to the get element by ID screen dot inner HTML equals 0.
Beautiful. So pretty standard flow here, right? A little easier than probably we were anticipating. We said, hey, our clear clicked, we want to do something else. What do we want it to do? We want it to call this function over here. All we're going to do is go to the screen and clear out whatever's in the screen and set it back to the 0. All right. So our calculator is looking pretty good here, right? We're going to come in here and we say 3 plus whatever, and we can even chain things and hit equal and get out the answers we're expecting. We can, do errors. We can say clear 9 divided by 0 equals, we get infinity, but if we do 0 divided by, oh, that's not going to work. Actually, that is the problem. Oh, no, it's not. If we do 6 minus equals, we get the output that we're expecting. But what's the natural way to use a calculator? Yeah, there's buttons that are on the screen, but I should be able to push a button on my keyboard and have that show up. How do you think we would go about that? What concept have we kind of already used in order to react to something when a user does something? What's the JavaScript term for when a user interacts with our site and we want to pick up on it? What's that?
Event.
The event. So what we're going to do is we run into this problem of, well, we've done events where our JavaScript reach into our HTML. That's what we did last night. Tonight, we use an event in our HTML that reached into our JavaScript. But how do we reach into the keyboard? How do we tell the keyboard, hey, be prepared for an event coming in? We can actually
handler comes in, or
yep, that's exactly it. We're going to say document add event listener, and we don't need to tell it what we're adding the event listener to. We're saying the entire document be prepared, and there's going to be a function that runs. That function is going to be when a key gets pressed down. And what do we want when that key gets pressed down? We want the event, and we're going to console log key pressed. Okay, so I come over here to my HTML and I type any number on the keyboard or anything on the keyboard, and I get key pressed showing up in my console. Again, I'm clicked into this white area up at the top here, and if I hit any letter on the keyboard or any number on the keyboard, I get key pressed showing up in my console. Okay, that's cool, but where we need to know what key got pressed, right? So we go back into our code, and where did we get information about what button got clicked up here? We got that from our event. Well, we can get similar information from our event down here. So we console log out our event, and we go back to our browser and we press any key. And what do we get here? We get our keyboard event. And down here, we get a code, and we even get our key. Okay, well, that's cool. If I type in 0, I can open that up and see that I get my key as 0. Okay, what happens if I type, and we're going to get a little fancy here, Shift 8? Well, that's interesting. We get both the shift and the key star. So we're going to have to handle that a little bit because the code that I got was digit 8. But really what I wanted to do there was multiply instead. So we're going to have to handle our keys in there. So we are going to write a really long if statement here. We're going to say if our event.key is equal to 1, then we are going to document get element by ID. We're going to get the screen. We're going to get the inner HTML, and we're going to equal it to whatever the current inner HTML is plus R1. Okay, well, that's really messy. If we take this and we copy and paste this and do an else if it's 2, then do all of this again and set it equal to 2. That's really messy. We can refactor that code, right? We can clean that up a little bit. We can say if the event key is equal, and we can actually get a little fancy here. Why don't we say const numbers is equal to an array, and let's put all of our numbers in this. And now we can say if our numbers includes the event key that got pushed, then get the screen and add in whatever the event key was. So I come over here, and now when I push a number, it shows up in my screen. And if I say 9, 6, I get my 9 and my 6 showing up. So I'm going to go one step further in cleaning this up. I'm going to say, instead of doing my screen inner HTML over and over again, I'm going to move my screen into its own variable. So I can say screen in here instead. And the other thing I need to do is I need to reuse this logic, right? Because if the screen inner HTML is 0 or the error, we want to just borrow that logic again. So I'm going to take that whole if statement and I'm going to plop it in here.
So like, would if else statements conflict with each other, or is it because they're different functions, it's okay?
These will not conflict with each other. These are called a nested if statement. So what we're saying in here is if it includes the number that we're expecting, then come in here and figure out what the screen inner HTML is. If it's 0 or error, just use the event key. Otherwise, use whatever's currently in there plus the key. However, if whatever key we press is not 1 through 9 and 0 or 0 through 9, then none of this is going to ignore because this if statement is not true.
Okay. I sort of get it.
So I'm going to stop there, let you guys catch up. Make sure you understand, hey, we're using an array here. Includes is a function that is built into the array. So we can say if whatever key that gets pushed is one of the numbers in this array, then we're going to figure out how to update the screen. Otherwise, we're going to ignore it. I'm going to stop there and poll. more important to understand the code that I have on my screen than it is to get your code working, right? So make sure you're going through this. We are throwing pretty much everything at you that we can here, right? We're throwing arrays your way. We're throwing not only if statements, but nested if statements in here. We're using functions with that add event listener and the code that we have running. We're using the document object model here. We are using logic with the or statement, right? There is a whole heck of a lot going on here, all to make that button press show up on the screen. Archel, go ahead.
Can I try to talk this out?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So for the function of key down, we have our constant numbers 1 through 0, and we have the screen. So if we have the inner HTML of 0, so if the screen is 0, we're going to get an error unless we have another number other than 0 plus a key press.
Okay, hold on, back it up a little bit.
Okay, all right.
We get you were on the right track. We have an event listener that's listening for a key down that gives us more details about the event here.
And that comes from the keyboard, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And this entire function is what's going to happen when a key gets pressed. Then we get access to our screen through the HTML, and we define an array called numbers 0 through 9 that's going to include all of the keys that we actually care about. Then before we even get into this inner HTML, we say, hey, does the key that got pressed on the keyboard, is it part of the numbers array that we just defined? Because if I type the letter A, I don't really care what you're trying to do there. All I want to do is say, hey, was whatever you pressed included in the numbers array? If it wasn't, this if statement is no longer true. And so we just go down to the end of it. There's no other code, and we just ignore whatever key they pressed. However, if the numbers that we are expecting includes the key that they pressed, then we're going to go through and run whatever code is in here, because that's inside the if statement. Then we're going to say, does the screen inner HTML, what's currently showing up in the screen div, is it equal to 0? Or, that's our double brackets there, is it equal to the word error? If it is, take whatever key the user pressed and overwrite whatever was in the screen with the key that they pressed. Okay, if it was 0 or if it was error, we're going to do that. What if it's not? If it's not that, else what we're going to do is take whatever was in the screen, add in whatever key they pressed, and set both of those back into the screen's HTML.
So Max, the event listener listens for the event happening, which is the key, in this case, being the key being pressed down, right?
Correct.
And the handler runs the response. So why did we use the listener over the handler?
I'm not actually, I have to look that up. There is no event handler. There are only event listeners. So the listener is the function we use. And then what I would consider to be the handler is this entire function right here.
The const numbers in the new array?
Anything between that curly brace and this curly brace, I would consider to be the handler.
Okay, that clears it up.
The handler is the function that runs
Yeah.
when we are listening for that event.
Okay.
All right, how are we feeling? Does anyone need help with their code if they're following along? Zona.
So I tried my code and then now the buttons don't work at all.
Oh, great. Okay. Go ahead, share your screen. Let's take a look.
Yay. Okay. So this is
All right, so
moi.
the first thing I noticed is your indentation is off and you've got a red squiggly. So let's
Red
fix your
squiggly.
indentation first. 47. Oh, yeah, well, that's one problem. Go ahead and take that one out. That period, yeah. And then on 47, that needs to come over, right? And then one more. Okay, and then after that, we have one missing for your if statement on 42. So go down another line. Oh, no, you have, I'm sorry, you have that one there. You're missing the closing one for that.
So right here. Right here. Right here.
All the way at the end. So on 42, you've got your opening one. You need your closing one that you're missing.
So where do I put it? Right here?
So what do we want to run if the numbers includes our key that we're pressing? We want all of 43 through 47 to run if our numbers are includes. So hit enter there.
Okay.
And put in your curly brace.
Oh.
No. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Now hit enter again. No, you had that in the right spot. Back over. There you go. Now we need to close out the curly brace of our event on 47. I'm sorry, on 39, right here. You're missing that closing curly.
Okay,
so that goes down here.
One.
Yep.
Down
and then, yep. And then the last thing you're missing is the closing parenthesis for the event listener. So right here.
Oh, okay.
So no, that goes down at 49 as well.
At 49 as well?
Yes.
Oh, so this?
Yep.
Or okay.
Yep.
And
And
then
now you should be back in business if you save.
do I do that
Yes.
at the end or no?
It's optional, but you can. Doesn't hurt anything.
All right, cool. Just to make sure. All right. Times 9. Works. Thank you.
Yep. Jennifer.
Hi. All right. Well, I'm lost.
Okay.
And I think I'm lost like a while back because I entered in the clear clicked and it didn't work.
Okay. Share your screen to take a look. Okay, so it's telling you at line 14, you've got an issue. And so it's saying unexpected token try, but oftentimes the problem is not at the line that we see the issue at, it's with the line above it. We've got our equal clicked here, but you have no curly brace right in there. And delete out that closing one. Okay, now go back over. Okay, and so now what happens here, we're done with our equal clicked. So we need between 19 and 20 to say, hey, clear clicked and the event listener, entirely separate function. So we're gonna, between 19 and 20, we're gonna put the closing curly brace to match this opening curly curly brace up here. And the point of that is to tell the computer, hey, when equal is clicked, we want to do any code between the opening and the closing. And once the closing is done, you can ignore anything in clear clicked or this event listener because we're telling you, hey, it ends right here. So that's why we need those closing curly braces. I think you have an extra one down at 36. Go ahead and take that one out.
That would explain
Where it went.
missing.
So take it out at 36. Okay, and the semicolon with it.
Trying to watch what the console says to figure it out.
Okay, and save.
Huh.
Okay, and now we've got an issue at 35.
Yeah.
So
I need another curly brace to close something, I'm guessing.
you do. You need a curly and a parenthesis. Closing curly, closing parenthesis. Okay, we're back to no errors, which is good. Let's
Yeah.
go back to the browser and see what's going on.
So if I'm here and I want to add, I can't get it to evaluate.
Okay.
You need it. Well, I got it to clear.
Okay, let's take a look at your code again for your equal clicked.
Let's see.
Okay, so we still have the same problem you had last time. You've got your output and then you do nothing with your output. So you do this eval, you stick it in output, but then you don't tell the output to go anywhere. You've got to tell the output to go back to the screen and set the inner HTML equal to the output.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing that. I couldn't see the lines where you were.
Right here.
Okay, so I tell it here. No. I tell it to evaluate the input.
And to store it in the output, but then you've got to use your output in and get it to display in your HTML.
Let me look at this.
So look at how we get the error to show up on the screen. We need to get our output to show up on the screen as well.
It's the screen. I know what you're going for down here.
We do the exact same thing on line 18. We make the word error show up on the screen. We need to do the same thing with our output. We need to make our screen show the output instead of the word error.
It has to be documented.
Mm-hmm. Isn't an end there? Yeah.
Wish these boxes would stop popping up. Because then I can't see anything.
Well, they're giving you the answer. As soon as you typed inner, it had HTML in there for you.
So this would have to be output.
Uh-huh. No quotes. We want the value of the output to be there. We already calculated what the output is. Yep. So what we're saying is get the input, use the input, evaluate it, and get the output. Then take that output, use it right here to set the inner HTML of the screen in the HTML document.
Okay. I'm
So-
gonna need some more help with that. So I'll schedule something.
Okay. You should have your equal button working now, though. All right. So we're going to keep going just one more step here, and then maybe I will let you guys out early. I always promise that, and it never actually happens, does it? Okay, so I'm going to come down here. I'm going to find where my last curly brace is, right? Basically, I'm saying if the numbers are in here, but I want to handle other things, right? Because if I'm over here and I type in 3 shift and 8 for my multiply doesn't show up. Why doesn't it show up? Because it's not part of my numbers in here. Well, what I could do is add it on here, but I kind of want to handle them a little differently. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say else if. Now I could do another array up here and say const operators, but I'm going to actually show you we can use a little shorthand. We can make our array directly in our if statement, and we can say star slash plus or minus, or, well, yeah, let's do that. Then I can say if that array includes my event.key, then go ahead and take whatever key got pressed and add it on to the screen. So I save that. I come over here. I do my 3 times 3. And the last thing I want to do is make my enter button work. But when I'm entering, all it's doing is it's typing in 3 because it was the last button I clicked on. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to add my final else if here that says if the event.key is equal to enter, then use my equal clicked function. Whoa, what do we do there? We already had our equal clicked defined up here. I want it to do all of that work when the event key is enter. So if I come back over and I refresh out my code and I say 3 times 3 and hit my enter button, I get 9. I can even get fancier there and say if my event key is enter or my event key equals the equal button, then also run that code. So I come over here, I say 3 times 6 and I hit enter and I get 18. Okay, so we did a lot of work there. We have our if statement that's checking to see if it's a number. If it is a number, we got to check to see what's in the screen. If it's not one of those numbers, we come down here and we have another array that we could have defined in a separate variable, but this is called an inline or an anonymous array. Why is it anonymous? Because we didn't name it, right? So all we did is we defined that array inline and we told it the things that we're listening for. We said if the event key includes one of these 4 items, then go ahead and tag that text in here. And then finally, we said else if the event key is enter or equal, go ahead and run that equal clicked. That's it. You made a calculator. That's all I have for you. How are we feeling?
Overwhelmed.
overwhelmed, but like we could take this and maybe actually explain what this code is doing.
Slightly, not there yet.
Okay.
Part-
Like you lost me in this entire section.
In the key down.
Yeah.
Okay. What line did I lose you at?
The if number includes event key, like that
Okay.
entire if.
Okay, yeah. So let's take a step back at what that's doing. So we ran.
Started from like the beginning from the document and then, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let's work our way down. So we started with, we know we have different events, right? And we've used events to do our on click. We've used events. Now we're using a different kind of event called key down. And that event is whenever the user presses a key down on their keyboard, we want to be able to capture it. And the details of that event are getting captured here.
Okay.
So what we do is we tell our HTML, add an event listener, listen for a key down event. And when that happens, run all of the code in this function and give us the detail about that event right here.
Okay.
Now we say, okay, well, what are we trying to do whenever that key gets pressed down? We're going to need access to the screen. So let's go ahead and get that element. Okay.
So
Now,
that's that line means we need access to the screen and we have it.
Correct.
Okay.
Now we got to say, well, what key downs do we care about? Because we don't want them to be able to press A and have A show up in the screen.
Okay.
But we do care about if they press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So we could do that as a very long if statement. We could say if the key is equal to 1, or if the key is equal to 2, or if the key is equal to 3. But recognizing here that we don't actually care about what the key is. All we care about is that it was a number key.
Okay.
So in order to not have to write out an if statement with 10 or clauses, instead, I got a little fancy with an array. I said, here are all of the numbers that we care about, all of the keys we care about. But because it is a list of data, we use an array and we store that all in numbers.
Okay.
Now we say we only want to do this stuff if what key they pressed was a number. The key that they pressed is coming from the event itself. So whatever this event.key is, if they press 5, event.key is going to equal 5.
Okay.
Okay, from there, we say, does the key they press, does the numbers include whatever key they pressed? So if they press 5, 5 is in this array, so this inner if statement is going to run. If whatever key they press, if they press A, the numbers does not include A, so we ignore this whole if statement and go down here and check to see if the whatever they pressed is one of these symbols. If it's not one of the, if it is one of those symbols, we add that symbol to the screen. If it's not one of those symbols, we come down for our last if, and we see if it's the enter or the equal button. The way we wrote this, we easily could have written that here and here with 10 or statements and 4 or statements here. But we kind of got hacky and said, hey, well, we simplified our code a little bit, right? And just said, well, check to see if the key is in this array. If it is, then do this code. So we did the same thing down here, except because there were only 2 of them, we wrote it out as an or statement.
Okay.
Now we go into what those if statements are doing. This if statement is identical to this if statement up here. The only difference that we're doing is we're saying use the event.key as opposed to the button that got clicked. So in here, we're saying if the screen is displaying a 0 or an error, just like up here, we want to override whatever is in the screen with whatever key got pressed.
Gotcha.
Else, if there is something already in the screen, go take whatever key got pressed, add it to whatever is currently in the screen, and set that equal to what the screen should now be showing.
Okay.
Okay, that is if any number gets pressed.
Mhm.
Then we come down here and we go, okay, if it's a star, divide, plus, or minus,
Mhm.
based off of what key they pressed, go ahead and add that to the screen as well.
Okay.
So if 4 gets pressed, 4 includes the number in the array. We run this code in here and we forget about everything down here. But basically the computer's working its way down and saying they press the enter key. The enter key is not in our numbers.
Mhm.
Okay. The enter key is not in this array either. So we are going to come down here and say, is the enter key equal to enter, or is the key equal to the equals button? Well, it is equal to the enter button. So we finally come down here and get your last curveball of the night, equal clicked. Like, what is that? Well, we already did all of the work up here to make that equal button work. So what we did is we reused this function. One of the whole reasons we have functions, took everything that was in here and tell it to run right here.
Okay.
So
No.
we could copy this whole thing and paste it in here, and it would do the exact same thing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for explaining that, because that makes it so much better. So much more understandable. And just and correct me if I'm wrong, so we can put a function within another function?
Oh, you could put functions and functions
Oh my
and
God.
functions.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
I really, maybe I'll get special permission of my boss to pull out some code snippets I'm particularly proud of, and show you guys what real life JavaScript looks like. Working our way up to that. This is real life JavaScript though, right? This is a project that you can be proud of. You can put on your portfolio. You can say, look, I made a calculator. If you want to go back and style it, you definitely can. But this is getting you, this is like pretty much peak of everything that we've learned here, right? We're using our event listeners, we're using functions, we're using arrays, we're using not only if statements, but nested if statements or conditional statements. We're using the DOM, we're using objects with that event. We're using all kinds of functions calling other functions, right? This is about as complicated as it gets. We will move into the movie theater project, which will be 300 or 400 lines of JavaScript. But if you're looking at this, maybe other than the event listeners, everything in here boils down to everything we learned in that first week, right? So take all of your free code camp, and when you panic and look at this code and you go, my God, this is another language, break it down and go, wait, if statements. I did 10 lessons on if statements in free code camp. I got it then, I can get it now, right? Then go a step further. Whoa, square brackets. Square brackets mean arrays. Let me go back. I did stuff on arrays, right? Let me go look at those functions. Includes. I don't get includes, but I know numbers is an array, and numbers is an array because I see it up here. So maybe I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type in JS array includes, because that's something that's new to you guys, right? And the first thing I get is MDM. Second one is W3 schools. And what it's going to do is give me a breakdown. Okay, the includes method returns true if the array contains a specified value. Wait, true, false, those are Booleans. That's how if statements work. Well, now that I know includes is returning that if statement, let me go back over here and say, oh, if numbers includes the key, this is going to be true. So we're going to go inside that if statement. But if it's false, we know that this if statement will all be ignored. And because it's an else if, we're going to go a layer deeper and go run this. And if this is true or false, if it's true, we're going to go run this code. If it's not true, we're going to go down to our last else if, and we're going to check these conditions as well. And if none of that is true, we just ignore whatever key gets pressed. Two terms, or do we have any final questions on this? Before Kalai can ask, I'm posting this in the live stream channel so you guys can reference it. A version of this is also linked on tonight's outline. It is not the exact code that we wrote tonight, but it is very similar and achieves a lot of that same functionality. So if you guys would like to reference that, you can. Of course, there's always an opportunity to go back and refactor our code, make it a little bit easier to understand, but we are going for concepts tonight.
So for all this, so like the const button clicked, all that code is for the 1 through 9 plus 0. The equal clicked is the code to make the equal sign working. Cleared is to make clear working, and so on and so forth. So can you explain the event listener again? That tells us, or like,
this is handling when something gets pushed on the keyboard.
Okay.
Bobby, go ahead.
So so essentially would that work with the delete button as well? Just adding like doing a function for that one as well?
Sure would. Else if the event.key is equal to, I'm guessing it's delete. I'm not sure. It might be del. Let's see if this works. Clear clicked. 3 delete. No, that's not working. So what I would do to debug this is I would just do a console log event.key up here just to see what comes out. So I switch back over to my browser. I hit the delete button and they call it backspace. So I can come back over here, change this to my backspace, comment out this console log so we don't forget to clear things up, clean things up, I meant to say. Then we can enter whatever, and if we hit the delete button, it clears it out.
That delete button is from the keyboard?
Yeah.
Okay, I get it now. Okay, so these are keyboard inputs. Gotcha. I thought it was the calculator inputs. I'm like, isn't that what the button click is for then?
Sorry, no. You can't see me. I'm actually hitting keys on my keyboard to make that happen.
All right, thanks for that question, Bobby. That helped.
Yes, when we're doing the key down, we mean actually key on the keyboard that is moving down when you push it.
Yep, I got it now.
And my microphone is directional enough that you can't hear when I push any of the keys. Okay, let's head over to the term sheet. Capture any vocab terms from tonight. And the good news is we took a project that was supposed to take 2 days and did it all in 1 day. I know you guys felt it on that last function, but that means we get even more practice in our JavaScript working on another project. And we are talking about what one will do. We might do whack-a-mole or rock, paper, scissors, or we might try and implement some game. But coming down the pipeline, we're going to get more practice with nested objects. So we are going to work with data structures a little bit more on the computer science side. That's going to be our weather app that we're working on tomorrow. We'll then move into the movie theater project, where we work more with data structures and deal more with event handlers, user input. We're going to get more practice with all of this stuff. We wrap up with tic-tac-toe. And start learning about how we make the computer think a little bit, right? How can we use those if statements and get that to move on us, move for us? And then if we have time, we'll get into like whack-a-mole or rock, paper, scissors, shoot, or some other game there. So lots more coming down the pipeline. Okay. Terms for tonight. What did we learn?
What did we not learn?
Regexes, while loops. Oh, sorry. That was a rhetorical question.
Try catch.
Try catch. Error handling. Telling the computer to try a block of code, and if it throws an error, catch it and do a different block of code instead.
Equal clicked.
I'm gonna say custom functions, a way to define a on-click event in our HTML and define the function using the same name in our JavaScript. So that covers equal clicked, clear clicked, all of those, right? And we could have named them just about anything as long as we were consistent on our HTML and our JavaScript calling it the same thing.
Event.key.
Event listeners, and then we'll say key down. A way to listen for keyboard input, then run a function based off that event.
Includes
a built-in JavaScript function on all arrays to determine if the value in the arguments is in the array the function was called on.
Eval.
A way to evaluate a string as if it were JavaScript.
Anonymous array.
Anonymous array, put it in parentheses here, or object. A way to define an array without having to name it. Think inline array. And when I say inline array there, I just mean that we use that array right in the line of code, right? Instead of doing it in a different line of code. So that's what when I say inline array, that's, you know, hey, we just created an array, but we didn't name it or save it anywhere.
If and else if statements.
If, else, if statements. A conditional way using logic to say if something is true, then run this block of code, can be chained together with else if statements to check for multiple multiple logic statements.
So screen dot inner HTML is just saying this is what the screen is. So run this on the screen.
Yeah, it's basically saying go get, when we say get element by ID screen, we're getting that whole div.
Okay.
And then the inner HTML is saying update what comes between the two div tags.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so if you look at our calculator, when we do like 6 minus something, if you actually look into this div, you can see the 6 minus is showing up.
Right. Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else for this evening that we want to capture in the terms? Okie doke. You guys have an awesome night. I will stick around just in case there are any questions. But otherwise, you guys have an awesome evening. I will see you all tomorrow.